Oh, okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dale Lefevre, Emeritus Faculty, Family Medicine.
Hey, Tyler.
Hi there, Tyler James, Assistant Professor, Family Medicine.
Great. Fermi.
Hi, Saumya Okanlami, Assistant Professor of Family Medicine, Physical Medicine and Rehab and Urology, and Director of Student Accessibility and Accommodation Services.
Wonderful. Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Katz. I'm a science communicator for the Department of Family Medicine, and I also help promote MDisability.
Wonderful. Amy.
Good morning, Amy Sanamore. I'm the Development Officer for the Department of Family Medicine.
Wonderful. Ariana.
Hi, I'm Ariana Nagosian. I am a recent U of M grad and also a recent MDisability intern and now a research assistant here. So
Great. Diane.
I'm sipping my coffee. I am a professor at the University of Michigan in family medicine and OBGYN and bioengineering and women and gender studies, and that's it.
And Josie. Yeah, we can give Josie a second. I know you just popped on. For some reason, you're actually next on my list, but let's go ahead with Linda. Good to see you here, Linda. Okay, maybe we give a second. Katrina.
Here I am. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
I'm off camera because I'm moving around. So anyway, I'll be on camera a little later. Linda Longbeliel, UMass Medical School, and I'm an assistant professor there.
Wonderful. Katrina. Okay, maybe we give her a second. Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Meeks, Associate Professor of Learning Health Sciences and Family Medicine and Executive Director of the Docs with Disabilities Initiative.
Wonderful. And is it Soma? I want to make sure I pronounce it right. It's Soma?
It's Saumya. Hi,
Saumya.
this is Saumya. Hopefully you can all hear me and it's not too echoey. I use any pronouns. I'm a South Asian person with medium length black hair and a blue floral shirt, and I'm the research project coordinator for student accessibility and accommodation services with Dr. O.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ochimogo, and I do communications for the Department of Family Medicine.
Awesome. Okay, well, I don't know if I missed anybody here. Did I miss anybody?
Josie.
Oh, darn.
I think everybody knows me. I work with Mike. I'm the MDisability Program Coordinator with the Department of Family Medicine.
Sorry about
And
that.
Josie.
Yeah, I'll jump in too. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the late introduction. I'm Josie. I'm a research assistant for Dr. McKee and Dr. James.
Great. Okay, so I am delighted to actually have both Saumya and Dr. O present on their project. And so they're going to be giving us an overview on one of the adaptive sports projects. I'm not sure who is going to be taking the lead.
I will be.
Okay.
So I'll do an introduction actually. So it will not be specific to adaptive sports actually. So the presentation is really around student accessibility and accommodation services more globally. And as you can see here with the title, research as a common thread for SAAS's body of work. So very briefly, I'll tell you what student accessibility and accommodation services is now. It's the umbrella unit that we have that governs student disability services at the university. So prior to me taking over the interim director of SSD, Services for Students with Disabilities, what we had as an institution was that one office, Services for Students with Disabilities, and within it, we had a few academic coaches. That was the entirety of the program that we had here to provide access for our students with disabilities for the entirety of the University of Michigan campus. What student accessibility and accommodation services is now, it encompasses the Office of Services for Students with Disabilities, SSD, 2 testing accommodation centers for students that have any testing accommodation needs, and we have 2 physical centers. We have the Academic Support and Access Partnerships team, which is essentially executive functioning skills support for our neurodivergent students. And then we've got Adaptive Sports and Fitness program. So those 4 entities are what come together to then make SAAS. And the way that Saumya actually was able to join the team was that I was fortunate to then get a K-12 through the Department of Urology. And through that work and the cost savings that we were able to have, I was able to then pitch to the Dean of Students and the Chief Health Officer that being able to then leverage the data that we have and to use research to explain why the work that we are doing has an impact, and to also provide justification for why the institution needs to then provide more resources to then support our students with disabilities. Through that, we were able to then get Saumya's role. So she's been with us for just about a year, and the K is a 2-year research grant. So we've got 2 years of funding for Saumya. And so really she's going to be the one taking the lead, talking about the amazing work that she's been able to do with us. So Saumya.
Hey everyone, and feel free to throw any questions in the chat throughout this. There is a lot to go over, so I'll do my best to make sure it stays organized and so that you can kind of understand overall all the different research efforts that are going on in SAAS. So I called this presentation Research as a Common Thread for SAAS's Body of Work, and the reason for that, as Dr. O kind of mentioned, is because previously students sort of recognized different entities of our work. So a lot of students may not even recognize us as SAAS yet. They still see us as SSD, or they go take tests at the TAC or the Testing Accommodation Center. And we also have our coaching program. And before, all of those were kind of seen as separate entities. But now, as we're kind of coming together as an organization that is meant to support students in multiple aspects, it can be a little challenging, not just for students, but also for us on the team to sort of understand why it is that we're working together. Find the commonalities in our work and help support that sort of identity as an organization as a whole. So here is a little bit of a more explanatory chart of our organization. This isn't really an image, so I didn't make any alt text for it, but basically what's on this slide is an organizational chart that you don't have to look through and read everything, but it uses different colors to show these different bodies of work that we have. So in yellow, we have the team that focuses on equitable academic access. So that includes what used to be SSD only, and then what used to be TAC by itself. And then purple shows instead of academic access, it focuses on academic success. So it talks about academic support and coaching and other resources that they're able to provide to help students succeed in any of their goals. And then in blue, we have our Adaptive Sports and Fitness program. And then we also have the roles that support SAAS as a whole. That's shown in left. The Stewardship Program Coordinator, Anya Kobler, is shown in that sort of bluish teal. And then my role is the Research Project Coordinator, shown in the right in orange. And then, of course, our director, and the 3 of us sort of support all of this work as a whole. So the purpose of this slide is to just show like where the different bodies of our work exist that I will be talking about today and how we kind of fit together. And so because SAAS is a relatively new entity in terms of its branding as an organization as a whole, I wanted to explain who we are in terms of these specific services that we provide. But the benefit of combining them under one umbrella is really so that the students that we serve can have a less decentralized experience, and we talk about this a lot when it comes to institutional support for students. So it's so that they can have a less decentralized experience in trying to find support and accommodations, and also so that our staff can work together and improve together while making sure that we're all on the same page of what true access and equity mean in the world of disability. So it also helps us perform better and be more smooth in providing that access. But even still, some people who've been at this institution for a long time, they may feel like combining these 4 separate bodies of work feels, challenging or forced. And so I wanted to go over the different ways that our team has kind of worked together to recognize SAAS as a sort of identity, or organization with its own identity. So I wanted to start with our mission and vision, which we've worked together as a unit to conceptualize over this past year. So our vision is that we envision an academic experience, a campus, and a world that values equity, accessibility, inclusion, and belonging for all. And then our mission is that we lead the shared work to change perspectives around disability, dismantle systemic barriers, and provide individualized support for disabled students at the University of Michigan. And what I like personally about these statements is that they represent more than just the work that others might know us for. So for example, accommodations or testing or coaching or adaptive sports, but it includes the different ways that we're striving towards that vision. And it includes different aspects of our work that people may not have heard as much about. For example, our professional development events and things like that, with different schools and colleges, or the community work that happens in the adaptive sports and fitness program, and all of this, which I will talk about more. But that's sort of the first way that we have created an identity for what SAAS is as a whole. And then to transition a little bit more into research, so this is where I come in. SAAS is housed under student life. And so I was asked to develop specific program learning outcomes that can then be the focus of our research and assessment. And honestly, I didn't think much of this process because it felt very much like another, thing to check off. But then when I worked with our team and we sort of decided what was important for us to measure, what was important that our students experience in working with us, we were able to come up with 5 ways, 5 different things that we want students to experience with our program. And it kind of shows where all of our work is tied together. So just to read the slide, it says, as a result of engaging with SAAS, students will feel supported and that they belong. Students will feel comfortable advocating for themselves and their disability identity in academic space settings and beyond. 3, students will develop the skills needed to succeed at their goals while maintaining personal well-being. 4, students will be able to connect with campus resources and communities to help navigate the university experience. And 5, students will be able to reach and expand their potential as active participants in the campus community. So as I go through all of our different projects, you'll kind of see how they connect to these 5 main program learning outcomes that we're hoping that students get from working with us. And then also document that goes over this grand plan of research and assessment. But hopefully this presentation is a little bit more engaging than a 20-page master document for you all. So I wanted to start with something that's both simple and also a little complicated, and that's just basic monitoring. So the first major development with our data collection plan was to improve on the process that we use to report data when we get requests from other departments. So often we'll get a request that's saying, hey, we need to know for our DE&I goals how many disabled students there are in the College of Engineering. Unfortunately, we can't provide that because not all students with disabilities need accommodations. And so we don't, our records will not show numbers like that, but still has highlighted this importance of data collection and being able to report not just where students are coming from and things like that, but also what the growth of our office looks like and things like that. So some of the examples, these are only some examples of the many things that are being monitored. There's a different list for what's being monitored daily, weekly, monthly, semesterly, annually. And right here, what I'm showing is basically for an example for SSD, right? On a basic level, we're just, monitoring how many appointments are completed. And then for things like the TAC, we do tests facilitated, ASAP, coaching sessions completed, things like that. And so these are some very simple graphs, but the end goal of this is to sort of take this to a sort of like a data dashboard where it can be constantly updated and share and so that we can share it with our, colleagues in student life and things like that. What this also shows, so you're seeing a graph of SSD meetings completed. Something that it shows that people may not think about is that we actually have a pretty consistent number of appointments based on active days. That little dip you see is actually fall study break. But our meetings stay very, very consistent to how many appointment slots there are, which means that we're not able to show what growth looks like using this mean. So this is sort of to paint a picture of like, when we start serving more students, appointments and things like that are not necessarily going to increase because there's only so many hours in a day. So with this kind of data management, we're able to make these living graphs that update throughout the semester, and we're able to share things like that. Another, misconception that this can debunk is, a lot of folks think that students just have welcome meetings at the beginning of the semester and that throughout the semester that goes down, but actually, every single day we are, onboarding new students with accommodations every single day at almost the same rate, all the way up until finals. So that's something else that this is kind of showing and painting the picture for. But that's like a basic level. I know everyone does this to some extent. A lot of you work in Michigan medicine, so you're very familiar with having to monitor these things. But I do want to talk about like the sort of challenges that we experience with this. A lot of it is also improving upon Accommodate, which in this view you can kind of see Accommodate in my bookmarks, but it's basically our data management system that we use. So it's working with them. They have not worked with an institution as large as ours before, so we're all kind of learning from each other to improve things.
So I'll jump in there. So Accommodate is our My Chart. So when I first came, we did not have an electronic data management platform. And so all of our student records were on either paper files or in files that an individual would keep somewhere in their Google Drive. We did not have a system of actually searching for records in a consistent fashion, and the way that people kept them was all over the place. And so Accommodate is the equivalent of going from paper records to Epic.
Yeah, and it's still being improved. There's a lot of different aspects of it, including reporting, that we can start working with them to make it a little bit more robust. Along this line, here's some key figures that I wanted to share about the growth of our office. So as of today, as of this morning, we are serving 5,445 students total. I can tell you right now that number has increased from the 7 a.m. that I checked this, because we do have welcome meetings every single day. About 24% of those students are graduate students. We serve every school and college except for the medical school, because they have their own office. And so this number represents a 13% increase since fall 2022. And that's since the end of fall 2022. From now until the end of the semester, we expect that percent increase to also increase. And then just to show the growth of our office, we've had a 70% increase over the past 5 years. And there's many different reasons for this. Part of it could be the rebranding of our office, but there's also, as a lot of you all know, a huge increase in disability awareness overall, and that is being reflected in our students as well. One of the largest populations that we serve, and we're sort of looking at changing the way that we categorize the disabilities in our system. But one of the largest populations that we serve is classified as psychological conditions, like depression and anxiety. And one of our largest growing populations, so we've seen a larger proportion of these students, is ADHD and autism. So that's some key figures.
I'll address Dr. McKee's question. So Dr. McKee asked if there were prior reporting mechanisms to leadership and other governing entities that were required, because you can't imagine paper files. So I will be honest and say that this was an office that, as an institution, we had to have, of course. And my predecessors did a wonderful job of running this space, but the way that they communicated the information was via paper files. I mean, so in terms of reporting what was happening, the work of this office really wasn't something that, it's kind of, you all know that I like sports. It's kind of like the kicker or the holder on a football team. No one knows who they are until they mess something up often. And so the office was not in a very visible relationship with the rest of the institution until there was a complaint. And then we did have partnerships with our Equity, Civil Rights, and Title IX office, our ADA coordinator office at that point, such that if there was anything that we needed to do from a reporting standpoint, yes, it would be, they would have to then get the paper files out, go through and look in people's email accounts and the Google Drive, wherever they save things. It was an absolute mess. So yes, Mike, it was absolutely absurd to try to keep track of student records prior to us being able to use Accommodate. So it is something that has greatly improved since we've been able to now add this data management platform. And that's where we're trying to optimize its use to be able to extract as much data as we can to continue demonstrating how we can improve upon what we need to then provide the access for our students. And another sort of addendum to what she said, while we work with all, we don't support the medical school from a standpoint of our coordinators, our disability access coordinators do not then work one-on-one with medical students for their accommodations, but it is our office that then funds the accommodations that come through for medical students. So there's still some things here and there that JT and Jansen will do on their own from a funding standpoint, but for the most part, we are the ones that fund the accommodations for medical student disability access.
Good. At this point, I'm going to transition to a different type of data collection. So are there any other questions about monitoring, data management, or anything like that? I'll be quiet for a little bit so you can think about it. Okay. Feel free to throw any other questions in the chat at any point.
Sorry to interrupt. I have one quick question. Are y'all planning to present any of this to NASPA or any other higher ed administration conferences?
So we attended AHEAD last year and we had a few presentations, but we had not come to a point where we had really even a full year's worth of Saumya's role to be able to give data that would be comprehensive in some way. But yes, and you can talk about some of the research you've already done and where you went with Janelle and Sarah.
Oh yeah. So I've attended the NASPA had a conference specifically for student success, and I attended their sort of assessment and evaluation portion of that. I saw some great presentations there. Both this and what I'm about to talk about, I would love to present what we have been, what's been going on, and share what data collection has looked like for us and what that means for our students. So absolutely, I'd love to present this in the future to NASPA, to AHEAD, even to our internal Student Life Research Symposium, and maybe at the next year's CDHW Symposium. All of these things I would love to spread the word about. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and we thank you for this invitation because this gave us an opportunity to put this together. So all of this is what Saumya has been doing over the past year, but there hadn't been occasion to put it all down in one place and have this. So this has really been a great opportunity. So that's why I'm letting her really run the show, because this has been her baby this entire year.
Yeah. And speaking of my baby, because I want to talk about something I've been super excited about, which is our first ever student survey. Students get a lot of survey fatigue, so I was very much discouraged to send out another survey to our students. This survey is live right now. And so I wanted to make sure that in our data collection plan that we had different types of data collection that weren't just survey data. But I realized that we didn't have many, formal routes for getting student feedback, and that there was a limit to what we can say without that student feedback. So over the past year, I developed our first ever student survey, and it went out to about 5,078 students. Not all of our students, but the ones who have worked with us long enough to have an opinion about what we do and everything that they've experienced so far. And so currently, while it's live, we have an 18% response rate. With, if anyone has worked in student services or anything like that, that's pretty high. We're still working on it, and it seems like a lot of students have a lot to say. So the goals of the survey are basically to one, identify a baseline satisfaction with our services. There's not going to be much that we can do with this data this year. But if we can continue the survey, continue to do it over the next few years, we can kind of monitor how change looks like and what change looks like as we make changes within our services. And then the second goal is to identify areas for growth or areas that we have been growing in, and then also areas for improvement. So getting the student perspective on that. And then also we asked questions about their experiences with the implementation of their accommodations in their courses. And this is so that we can improve communication with our instructors. We have a guide on how to provide the basic accommodations for students that we see the most. And so basically to improve on that guide, but also to improve in how we advise instructors to support students. This is sort of to get an idea of what the actual lived experience is of having accommodations. Another goal of this is to advocate for student needs to the university. There's not many opportunities to get this kind of detailed feedback that we can show, like X% of students really would like this thing. We can present it both what we're able to do, but also bring it up to other entities to let them know how they can better support the students as well. And then something I'm personally interested in as a queer, brown, disabled person myself is identifying the disparities based on intersectional identities. So taking this data that we're collecting, disaggregating it based off of multiple different identities in a way that you can't just do with university data alone. This will help us sort of identify the unique experiences of students with those intersections, whether it be race or gender or sexuality and things like that. And then finally, I wanted to use the survey to evaluate the relationship between students and SAAS. And by that, what I mean is many students still see us as SSD, which sort of has a long and tumultuous history and tension that comes with it. And while we're still far from perfect, we would love to see SAAS as a place that supports disability identity along with access. And so we want to understand what relationships students have with their identity and what relationships students envision having with us. So kind of looking at this list as a whole, you can also see how this too is a common thread between all of our bodies of work. SSD, the ASAP or our coaching center, our testing center, and even adaptive sports and fitness. We can see how experiences are varying across the students who interact with our different programs and services. And we'll get to see, how things look when the results come out. And there's also a chance that some of the folks who are eligible for our survey are actually in this call, so I won't share any preliminary results. But I can't wait to talk about this in the future. Like Tyler was mentioning, maybe at a conference or maybe here again, because this survey project has been like my idea baby that's like a year in the making.
Answer Dale's question?
Yeah, so now I'll take a look at the questions. Sorry about that. Reporting problems is important. Do we plan to move to being more preemptive and preventing issues? Yeah, so this is, I don't know if you're able to help support with this answer. Yeah.
I'll say that's primarily the purpose for the data collection, because without knowing what the problem is, we don't have the data to then share with them what we think the solution should be. And so what we're able to then do by having the student data is to say, this is what the students have been saying about how we can then improve the experience they're having with our unit. So gathering the data first so that we don't have to be reactive alone. And that is the reason why we're getting that. So yes, exactly, Dale. The purpose is to have data to support why we're making the changes we're making. Otherwise, they could say, why is it that you think this should happen? Well, we think this should happen because we have data that shows that this is what students have been experiencing. So yes, thank you, Dale.
And I would also add that, because my role is new, it's been really beneficial because I think without my role, there would be everyone is focused on serving students in our office, and there would be nobody who has the time to sort of step back and take a look at the big picture and see yes, we hear so many things from students, but can we, present that in a way that's quantitative? Can we present that in a way where we can use quotes and specific things that can help us, advocate for them on a university level and also to make changes in our own office? So absolutely. And then this is sort of related. Like I said, there's a lot of projects, but I didn't really know where to put this one. But as a part of the K that Dr. O mentioned in the beginning, one project that we did with the Department of Urology with Dr. Courtney Struer is the College Students with Disability Study. So I put this in this section because this is sort of also talking about the lived experience of students with disabilities from colleges. So we did a qualitative interview study. We conducted 14 interviews with students across the country. Some of the topics covered in there include, how is accessibility actually experienced beyond accommodations, and what does true accessibility look like? We talk about the transition from high school to college and also to adulthood. So, what your social relationships look like, romantic relationships, your relationships with your professors, your medical providers, things like that. Lived experiences with bladder and bowel management, that was one big focus that we wanted to talk about. Is yes, there's a lot of recommendations that we can provide, but how does it actually, what actually goes down when a student has to do bladder and bowel management and also go to classes and things like that. And then finally, the other thing that we talked about is making recommendations for colleges and universities based on everything that I just mentioned. So I wanted to talk about this study briefly. You can anticipate probably seeing some things coming out of it in the next few weeks. But that's another project that is going on. And so just speaking from like the academic perspective, the sort of future work here, and I'll get into adaptive sports soon, I promise. But based on everything I've described already, there's a sort of few different directions we can go in, and I put these particular departments in because I've been inspired by their work, because they've been able to do something that we haven't had a chance to do yet, and that is conduct focus groups with their students, and especially with students with multiple intersecting identities. Recently, the Spectrum Center gave an amazing presentation at the Student Life Research Symposium about how they conducted focus groups with queer trans students of color to better understand their relationship or lack thereof with the Spectrum Center itself. And so with this, they were able to sort of co-envision what that relationship could look like and how to uniquely serve their needs and address their struggles. Some of the findings from that study were really interesting. It highlighted how a lot of those students who had intersectional identities, they didn't feel like they belonged at the Spectrum Center, and they didn't feel like they could even connect with their own queer identities. And for many reasons, it could be because queerness itself is identified very much through a white lens and things like that. And try not to get distracted, but the connection I see here is that students and their relationship with their disability identity. I'm curious to take what we find from the survey and see if we can see which areas we can kind of expand on, and see, how we can sort of cultivate disability pride at the institution, to better students' relationships with their own disability identity, but also with our office. So I just wanted to talk briefly about what could be happening in the future before I get on to adaptive sports. So adaptive sports and fitness, as many of you all know, is a group that encompasses our competitive teams. So like, as you see below on the bottom, adaptive track and field, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby now, and wheelchair tennis, as well as many different community and recreational opportunities, like our drop-in practices, and also, in the community we had an introduction to amputee soccer recently. So different community events like that. And then also some research that is associated with that, which I will talk about in a bit. But Dr. O, do you have any other, highlights of ASF that you want to share?
No, I'll just answer Dr. Harper's question. Our sports played by graduate students too. So our program is open to everyone, students, faculty, community, staff, anyone. So we've got undergraduate students, we've got graduate students, we've got PhD students, we've got community members, we've got anyone that wants to participate is participating. And then how comfortable are students in asking for an accommodation, and how informed are faculty members to help? So that is a bigger question. I'll answer quickly and then let Saumya get back to ASF, but I'd say it varies by the student. Some students come in very familiar with advocating for themselves and knowing what they need from an accommodation standpoint and being able to then speak to the instructor about it. Other students may come in having had their parents do everything for them, and so they're not very comfortable with or familiar with advocating for their needs and coming to the office and then saying, I identify as having a disability. I see this barrier to my access in the classroom, and I'm trying to avail myself of the accommodations that would be reasonable and appropriate. And then you have another population of students that never even recognized that they had a disability until they got to college, or they may have thought they had a disability, but it wasn't supported by their family, their caregiver, their school. And so they never had accommodations, because too often what people are told is you're too smart to be disabled. And so because they've been successful, despite not having accommodation, they've been told that you can't need accommodations, you can't have a disability, look at your grades are good. So I'd say the comfort level of students with requesting accommodations varies based on what their experience with accommodation had been leading up to this point. And then you did a great job of ASF, and I know you'll get into the research.
There's another question by Dan Harper.
Are adaptive sports being played by all genders? Absolutely. So we don't have a single team that is a gendered team. So all of our teams are open to all genders. So we've got multiple We've got our wheelchair basketball team, the only team, if I can think of, if there's not a single team that we have that is exclusive to one gender alone. So, yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I would add, how comfortable are students asking for accommodations and how informed are faculty members to help? One question that we ask on the survey is going to be, or is, basically like it asks the student about what their experience has been with their instructors implementing accommodations. The point of this question is not to blame or point fingers or anything, but it's sort of to understand the gaps between, you know, like all three entities here, right? Instructors, our office, and the students. What are the gaps in communicating what access looks like? And I'm also a student who came to realization about my disability partway through my college experience. So it is definitely something that's important to me to understand. And of course, the survey is going out to students who are already connected with us. So the way that we're collecting data about students who are not connected with us is through Student Life's, their larger surveys about divisional impact. So they ask a question about the awareness. Basically, they ask a separate question about disability identity and then awareness of our office. So we can kind of gauge, it's not perfect, but we can kind of gauge the different levels of you know, the difference between disability identity and also awareness of our services, just to make sure that people are aware if they need accommodations where they can go for that. Yeah, there's potential again for focus groups in the future. If we do something like that, it may not necessarily just be for students who are connected with their office, but just students who identify as being disabled. And of course, even with that, there's a whole, you know, loadedness. But yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah.
And I will actually add something is, some of you on the call will know, but some of you may not. This program was born out of the Department of Family Medicine. So the Adaptive Sports and Fitness program started when I was only faculty in family medicine and I wasn't over on the student life side. So the infographic that you would have seen a few years ago would have been much smaller than this. But, you know, those of you that are on the call that have been part of MDisability, you know, Dr. McKee, you know, been very supportive of us growing adaptive sports and fitness at the university. So it's expanded significantly, but this program really started in the Department of Family Medicine. Amy Saint-Amour, who's on the call, has been very instrumental in supporting as well. Christian Ochomogo, Don Michaels. So everyone that's part of the MDisability team from the beginning has been instrumental in us being where we are now. And so that's why we're also proud to be able to show you where we are today.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some research. So some like specific research projects that are happening in adaptive sports and fitness. So there's the Adaptive Sports and Inclusive Recreation Initiative, or ASIRI. This is a program where we bring adaptive sports and inclusive rec to the middle school physical education level. In the past, this was piloted in the Ann Arbor Public Schools with their PE teachers and sixth graders. It involved training the PE teachers about disability awareness, but also providing an inclusive curriculum to their class. And then basically we introduced the adaptive sports to an inclusive rec curriculum to the sixth graders in what I would describe as like a pep rally. But it's like an awareness assembly to bring disability awareness and also introduce adaptive sports to them. And then finally they get to experience it in their actual PE class. So recently we've received funding from the Michigan Medicine Community Health Services to expand this across all middle school grades and then also into the Ypsilanti community schools. So it provides us a new opportunity to assess the impact of this initiative on the teachers and the students in the community as a whole. So that's one project, is talking about adaptive sports and bringing it to the middle school level. Another project is Prescription to Play, which is going strong. This is basically the movement that is bringing the medical world and the disabled community together with adaptive sports. If there are any medical students in the call, you might have seen some events that have gone out recently about this. The idea is that everyone in healthcare fields should be aware of the local opportunities available to people living with physical disabilities so that they can get physical activity and maintain their physical health as well. We've had some great events here, including a med students versus dental students basketball tournament. And there have been some major developments with our partners in Southern California, where they basically have developed a system to get medical students at the SoCal schools involved with local adaptive sports events as medical volunteers. And so for our end on conducting research, I promise I'll get to these questions soon. But for our end on this, we're basically conducting interviews to assess this impact with the participants of these events, And this is also ongoing. So we've just completed 3 interviews so far, and we just finished sending out invites to 2 out of the 4 waves of participants. And we have 2 more signups for interviews on that. So this is an ongoing study. Again, I would love to talk about preliminary findings because they're so cool. It's so great to see how people are changing their perspective on what it means to care for people with disabilities. Because they've seen both like adaptive sports for fun, but they also get to meet members of our team. So they get to see it played competitively. They get to see it at a high level. And it's just really cool to see the impact of that. So I'm super excited to see where those interviews go. And then finally, I wanted to talk about this adaptive sports research consortium that we've been working on pulling together. The research funding that Dr. O received provided an opportunity to collaborate with other adaptive sports researchers from across the country. So in this consortium, we bring together about 10 different institutions, and they all have different focuses in adaptive sports, right? Some focus on physiology, some focus on recreational therapy, some focus on sociology, and it's been really successful and honestly very fun collaboration. So one example of this is that during last year's wheelchair rugby nationals, we were able to work together to survey the athletes. Most of them have a spinal cord injury, right? So by collaborating and having one survey go out, we were able to essentially reduce their research fatigue, because athletes do participate in a lot of research studies. But it's basically talking about the boosting experiences of athletes, the bladder and bowel experiences of athletes, and the sexual health of athletes. So we were able to do all 3 of these in one collaboration. But besides that, our consortium has been a place to share ideas and learn about research in these different areas that I mentioned. So that's kind of where adaptive sports research is right now, and it's definitely growing. And just to make sure, did you answer all these questions?
Yeah, I've been answering them as they come through.
I appreciate you. Yeah. And I'll talk a little bit more. So I have a future work slide for adaptive sports, but I wanted to briefly mention what's happening at the WellBeing Collective. So
I'll pause and give some context there. Part of what we did was when I saw that I was going to have the resources to be able to post for a position, at the time, SSD was housed within the health and wellness portfolio of this institution. So that's where University Health Services, Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Centers, Wolverine Wellness, Services for Students with Disabilities, and I mean, that's it. We're housed within health and wellness. I then said to the other directors, there's an opportunity to then have a position. Does anyone have a need that we can then put together to be able to support? The other directors did not have a need other than Mary Jo Dupree, who was the person who was running Wolverine Wellness at the time. And so we then wrote a joint sort of job description so that Saumya has not only been helping SAAS directly, but she's also been the central figure doing the data collection research for the WellBeing Collective, which is something that came from all of the sort of the mental health task force recommendations, where a big committee was put together to address the state of mental health of our students over the past several years. And then one of the results of those recommendations was that the WellBeing Collective was formed. And that's what Saumya has been supporting as well.
And so briefly what that looks like. So the WellBeing Collective uses something that's called the Collective Impact Framework. The idea of which is basically when you want long-standing systemic level change for an institution, it puts a very heavy emphasis on making sure that it is data-driven. And what I wanted in this first year of WellBeing Collective is to not reinvent the wheel. There's already been tons of studies conducted about the well-being of students, staff, and faculty at the University of Michigan. So my role was to sort of compile all of these, and I made 2 reports out of it. One is the synopsis of recommendations for well-being. A lot of you might be familiar with the Student Idea Board report. So that is one such report of recommendations, and that we've now included in this synopsis of recommendations that have not yet been addressed, that have been formed by different members of the university community. The other report is a sort of presentation that's about current state of well-being. And what this kind of helps us do is identify the gaps of well-being as well, to see where we're not conducting enough research. We also reached out to, this is something that's called the Top 100 Influencers activity, but the 100 number doesn't really matter. We just reached out to different people across campus to ask them about what their what they envision in terms of well-being and how it could be improved on campus. And so finally, what comes out of all of this is a common agenda. I will let you all know, but I think they're planning on having some kind of a public event to reveal what this common agenda is.
Today.
Yeah. Oh. And then this is my last slide, basically, before we get on to questions. But to talk about future work, again, I should have put this next to adaptive sports, but you know what, I needed to include WellBeing Collective somewhere. So, but going back to adaptive sports, future work in this, a lot of you might be aware of this RFA that was sent out about a month ago. It's called Understanding and Mitigating Health Disparities Experienced by People with Disabilities Caused by Ableism. And this sort of inspired a team of people to come together and talk about how we can improve medical education around disability as a whole. And because of our experiences in already using adaptive sports and fitness to bring it to the medical community and change their perspectives on disability, we've sort of been looking at this future project of developing a formal educational intervention for healthcare trainees that's about disability awareness, and uses adaptive sports and also interprofessional education as a sort of vehicle to bring about that disability awareness. So that's just me mentioning it very briefly, but I wanted to talk about it because it is gaining some momentum, and it's something that we can look forward to in the future.
And thank you to those of you, particularly Tyler and Mike, that have already, and Dr. Harper, that have already given some feedback and are willing to at least offer a letter of support. I know that there are folks on the call that are going to be submitting for that RFA right now. What our plan is we're we are not going to be submitting to that particular RFA right now, but our hope is that over the next 12 months, we work together to put together an investigator-initiated project that will be the same project we would have. We know that the likelihood is lower, but at that same time, we did not want to rush something that now we're getting a lot of interest from partners across the campus and across the country to be able to put something pretty cool together. So we can have more conversations about that in the future, but that is something that we at least wanted to bring up during this conversation so that anyone that's interested in learning more can know and we can talk more about it. But I wanted to thank Saumya specifically because she has been amazing to then have as a teammate and a partner in this work. It's something that has truly allowed us to make decisions that have been seen by institutional leadership that have resulted in additional resources already. And it's something that, because we were really hemorrhaging in this unit with way too many students for few staff. And it was something that the staff weren't able to do this work themselves. So they weren't able to then get the data they needed to be able to justify why they needed help. And this is the data that has been able to convince the institution of the additional support that's needed. So thank you very much, Saumya, and thank you to all of you for the opportunity, and we'll open it up for any more questions.
I just have a quick statement. This is Tyler speaking. So a lot of people don't know, but my background and my entry into everything health related was through health promotion on a college campus at the University of Florida at Gatorville Health Promotion Services. And I was hired specifically for needs assessment and evaluation. And it makes me very excited to know that there is a Students with Disabilities department on a college campus that's invested in this, especially in a time where assessment on college campuses is starting to go away. Or starting to be merged into one single position for an entire division like student life or student administration. And so this just really excites me that y'all are focusing on your efforts on this.
Well, honestly, I credit everyone here for that because it was the opportunity to then come and do this work here, inspired by everything that MDisability and the department was doing, that the lens through which I looked at this work was saying, in order to then be effective in this work, we need to be more effective in gathering the data and being able to tell the story from a research perspective too. So to those that have known me for years here, I'm a self-proclaimed not a researcher, but knowing that when you pull a team of people together and you have the appropriate resources, then you have someone that's passionate and that really wants to do it and that has a background in research. That is how you can get the work done. So I really thank MDisability for opening my eyes to that and giving me some support to be able to then grow and have an opportunity like this in the first place. Linda, thank you, Tyler.
Yes. So you may have answered this already, and if so, I apologize. But how are accommodations at your university funded? Do you have a centralized accommodation fund, or do individual departments provide the?
Sorry. You did say you're moving around, so I put it in the chat, but yes, we do have a centralized accommodations fund for student accommodations. Now, as Mike knows, faculty and staff accommodations is something that this institution has not kept up with in the same way they have with student accommodations. And there's been really a push for the institution to have a centralized accommodation fund for all disability accommodations. And Mike has been part of those conversations as well. But from the student standpoint, we do have a centralized accommodation fund for students. There are some departments that augment that or that make a decision that they want to fund things themselves. But from the standpoint of what is it that we support, any school or college that then works with us, we fund the accommodations for students.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you for the great talk. So my question is really centered around advocacy. So students who are more likely to advocate are obviously more likely to get additional resources. So I can even just kind of think of my past experiences with Students with Disabilities Office where I had to realize that you really do need to advocate on your behalf. For those who don't do a good job advocating, what are some of the strategies to kind of help students who are, possibly can fall through the cracks, who are just not as likely to stand up and let people know when things are not going as well as they should? I don't know if there's any sort of approaches that your office takes to have like a very objective way to kind of assess that and provide more tailored resources for those individuals.
Yeah, I'll say that there's probably a multifaceted approach to that. One, there's the fact that we're going to be much more visible on this campus, and we are trying to then go beyond compliance alone. So unfortunately, our job is a compliance-based job. And we cannot go and say to a student, you look like you need help, you may be disabled, you're struggling in school, come and we're going to figure out what your disability is, what the barriers are, and give you an accommodation. So unfortunately, at the higher education level, it has to be the student that initiates the sort of disclosure to say, I identify as having a disability, or even you might not know you have a disability. You can say, I'm struggling with something. I feel like there's a barrier to my access. And then you come to see one of our disability access coordinators. They will do the welcome meeting with you and then talk through what those barriers may be, figure out what additional information might be needed, such as any clinical documentation that may be needed to be able to then provide you with the accommodation. That's the student to student way, or that's the one student at a time way. We also, however, by being more visible across the campus, are talking about universal design, because if instructors change their pedagogy, if instructors recognize that some of the things that they do are ableist in their definition, and they restructure how they teach, they restructure their courses, there wouldn't be the need for as many accommodations. So some of those students that may not be the biggest advocate for themselves wouldn't need to advocate for themselves because the course would not be a barrier. So that's another big way that we're doing it. Because if we can disseminate the information to the institution about different ways that you can teach, which the pandemic demonstrated that there are lots of different ways that we can teach. When they were forced to do it, they were able to do it. But as many of us have seen, the pendulum is somewhat swinging back as if we haven't demonstrated we can do things differently. And that is the primary way that we're trying to then assist those students that might not be the biggest advocates for themselves. The other way is trying to normalize disability such that even if you're not the biggest advocate, the stigma around disclosing that you have a disability is not one that we are perpetuating through our office. Because before, many people would not want to be affiliated or associated with the disabilities office because of the negativity that came with it, because of what people thought that you were not smart enough, not working hard enough, just looking for extra help. And so by really destigmatizing disability and changing the way that it's discussed on our campus, that is hopefully, and this is anecdotal, right? But hopefully that will lead to that student that might not be the biggest advocate being that advocate. But sort of by definition, what you're saying, I might not know who those students are right now, because if they're not coming to us, then I don't necessarily know what they may need yet. But understanding the landscape in general, these are the things that we can do proactively ourselves to at least try to address those things.
And that also addresses the question that's in the chat, which is, it is possible that a group singled out can feel special, and it's also possible that they feel different and deficient. So how can we integrate or how can we make it so that students feel special and excel? And I feel like this kind of addresses that in terms of there's multiple levels of change that we can make. And the reason that, the reason I wanted to talk about assessment is because I wanted to talk about how it's not just about numbers and things like that, but how do we talk about a person's relationship with their own disability identity, because a lot of that is rapidly changing in the four plus years that students are in university. So it's definitely a part of what I want to look at personally, is like how that is changing. I mean, like I said, we've seen a 70% increase in the past 5 years. So regardless of if that's because our office has changed or not, there's definitely something to be said about like this social movement that's kind of growing, and the awareness that's being brought to a lot of people in the younger generations because of social media and because of just their access to information increasing. So how can we bolster those efforts that are already happening? And yeah, that's what I would add.
And many of you may know that this is part of the reason why I've been so very passionate about adaptive sports and fitness, is because many of our students on campus with disabilities do not want to be identified as disabled students on campus, right? But our student athletes that are part of our program are proud ambassadors of this university. They go out wearing maize and blue with their backpacks and with their swag, competing and representing the institution. And what that shows other people is that disability is something that is celebrated and valued at the University of Michigan. And so if you see that there's a disabled student that then is on a commercial or on a poster or out in the campus and are representing the institution, and you see that they're happy and they're supported, you might find out, oh, well, this campus actually wants to make sure that I'm happy and supported. So that's the reason. It's not that adaptive sports is more important than anything else, but what it is that's the population that is more visible in the disability community. Just like you'd say, non-disabled athletes are in a university community. They can, if you pay attention to anything that's happening in our university system right now, good news that comes from athletics lifts all boats, right? But bad news that comes out of athletics is all people want to talk about as well. And so if you are a poor representation of your institution and you're doing things in the athletic department that do not represent them well, that can drag things down. But similarly, if you were doing things that are an exemplar and you're demonstrating how you then care for populations, that can then lift things up. So that's one of the reasons why we do think that adaptive sports and fitness is a vehicle to not just only change the stigma around disability on campuses, but it's also a way that providing access to physical activity for our disability community is another way that we are not trying to separate this, right? So our adaptive sports and fitness program, not only is it for students, faculty, and staff, it is for people and community members. It is for people with and without disabilities. You do not have to have a disability to play adaptive sports, because the way that we feel is that adaptive sports are not sports for people with disabilities. They are sports that are more accessible to and inclusive of everyone, so that more people then have access to physical activity and sport. But I see that we are running up on time. I see Dawn's message. Thank you very much, Dawn. And we'll pass it back over to Dawn and Mike to wrap up.
Thank you so much. So we just have a minute here. I want to thank everybody for coming and sharing their feedback and insights about this. And Dr. O and Saumya, thank you so much for sharing your program. I do want to let everybody know that December, Dawn, you have to help me at the exact date for the provider webinar series. Dr. Jane Shargat is going to be presenting, and it will be on advanced care planning and end-of-life issues. So palliative care for people with disabilities. This is a topic that is woefully, underserved and is just not really addressed. So I'm looking forward to that topic. It should be engaging. So I hope everybody can attend. Dawn, do you have the exact date?
Yes, December 14th.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are there any quick announcements before we close? Sorry, I'm a little congested, so hopefully everybody can understand me. Okay. Oh, Dawn. Yeah.
Mike, I think we just wanted to remind everyone that we're going to start planning for the provider webinar series next year. And also our monthly meetings will continue. So if you have speakers in mind or you yourself would like to present, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just also next month, we will be doing our next set of applications. We'll be submitting it. So if you can all share for the MDisability summer internship year for the calendar 24 year, we will be sending that out probably in the next few weeks. So we'll keep everybody posted about that. So, all right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Is it
then,
up there?